Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So if you've been following the news, you definitely saw the headlines recently. The U.S. has rolled out another round of regulations, really tightening the vice on advanced chip exports to Huawei and, a bunch of related Chinese AI companies.
Right.
And the stated goal here was to close loopholes. We're talking about giants like TSMC getting caught in this, all to make sure that the flow of these advanced AI chips is, well, joked off.
And, if that's all you read, you've really missed the most critical piece of the story. This isn't just stricter sanctions. It's not another small step in a trade war. We have to look at this structurally. Underneath the headlines, what we're seeing is the definitive second phase of OS-level decoupling.
OS-level decoupling. That is a huge claim. I mean, the permanent separation of the technological operating systems of the world's two biggest economies.
It is.
So why is this specific action phase 2? What makes this structural and not just, another turn of the screw?
Because the entire goal has shifted. Phase 1, that was about creating a crack in the system, introducing a vulnerability. Phase 2 is about institutionalizing that separation.
Making it permanent.
Making it permanent, making it operational. It's about designing a supply chain that can function in two entirely separate spheres. So our mission today is to give you the framework to really understand that permanence, the structure, the speed mismatch, and all the tension that comes with it.
So for everyone listening, trying to get their head around this really complex dynamic, we had to answer that one does-it question. What fundamentally changed this time around to make this feel so permanent?
Yeah, and to do that, we use the NIOS framework. It's a tool that helps us map this whole situation out across 3 distinct layers.
Yeah.
The stated narratives, the internal interests at play, and the actual operational system changes that are happening on the ground.
Okay, let's start at the top then, the N layer. The narrative. So these are the stories, the slogans, the public justifications. What are the narratives that are defining this separation now?
For the U.S., the narrative is all built around this idea of technological deterrence. And it's not just about stopping a few chips, it's framed as protecting AI x democracy.
Right.
The whole idea is that critical AI infrastructure has to stay within democratic, interoperable systems to, maintain security and keep it aligned with democratic values.
And on the other side, China's counter-narrative, which has always been about self-reliance.
It's now kicked into overdrive. It's a push for technical autonomy or Zilligang-Sheng. For Beijing, this isn't just an economic goal anymore. Achieving independence and high-density computing is now, it's fundamental to national legitimacy. The narrative is that relying on foreign tech directly undermines the party's core promise of national rejuvenation.
And what about the rest of the world? When these two giants make a move like this, everyone else has to change their story too.
Well, the global narrative has sort of moved on. The debate about the values of AI, that's kind of settled. Everyone's picked their camp. Now it's polarizing very, very quickly toward implementation power.
Implementation power.
Yeah. Who can actually build, manage, and deploy industrial-scale AI the fastest? The focus is functional now. It's not philosophical anymore.
Okay, that makes sense. So that brings us down the level to the I layer, the internal interest structure. When the OS starts to split like this, who wins, who loses? Whose risk profile just shot through the roof?
The U.S. wins, in a sense. It's cementing its role as the OS architect. They get to write the rules of engagement for the entire ecosystem, for all their allies and partners. It's about structural control.
And what about Taiwan? TSMC is so critical to both systems, but they are clearly falling under U.S. rules here.
Taiwan is walking the tightest of geopolitical tightropes. In the short term, this move actually gives them some stability. It reinforces their reliance on the U.S. security umbrella, on U.S. design tools.
But long term?
But long term, it forces them to start a definite managed reduction in their dependence on the massive Chinese market. Their internal interest is all about managing that transition without completely destabilizing their economy. It's an incredibly tricky balance.
And South Korea.
Yeah.
As a massive semiconductor exporter, they seem like they have the most to lose here, at least in terms of volatility.
Oh, they do. South Korea's risk exposure has gone up significantly. Their entire economic health is tied to these advanced chip exports, and the new, tighter U.S. rules mean their exports to China are going to be under a microscope.
They're caught in the middle.
Completely caught between two indispensable markets. The regulatory environment just became far, far more precarious for their big companies.
I can only imagine what this does to countries trying to stay neutral, particularly in Southeast Asia.
It's devastating for that strategy. For ASEAN nations, maintaining a truly neutral stance is becoming almost impossible. The new rules mean tighter surveillance of any potential loophole routes.
So you can't even be a bystander.
Exactly. If you're a neutral country that could be a transshipment hub, just trying to be neutral now comes with huge compliance risk. This separation forces a choice, even if it's an informal one.
This is where the rubber meets the road then, the OS layer. Let's forget the narratives and the interest for a second. What is the actual physical, practical change in the world's tech infrastructure?
The AI chip supply chain is now undergoing a complete U.S.-led bifurcation, and we're past just slowing down sales. We are now actively designing two separate hardware and software ecosystems that are, by design, not interoperable.
So what does that really mean for China's goal of technical autonomy for companies like Huawei or SMIC?
It means a quantifiable multi-year delay. We're talking years, not months. SMIC and Huawei on their own simply cannot manufacture the calculation density you need for competitive next-gen generative AI models.
So this gap in computing power,
Yeah.
it's not theoretical anymore.
Not at all. It's now manifesting as a real, functional, economic and military divergence between the two systems. You should think of it less like, running a different operating system on your computer. It's more like trying to build two different data centers where one of them can only handle a tiny fraction of the processing load.
That structural framework is stark. Let's talk about speed now, because whenever you try to pull apart massive, entangled systems, you get friction. You call this concept shear. How should we be visualizing this speed mismatch?
Imagine a massive geological fault line. You have these huge layers of rock, and they're all moving at fundamentally different speeds. That grinding is shear. In geopolitics, we have two layers of reality doing the same thing.
Okay, so you have the high-speed tech layer and the slow-moving geopolitical layer.
Exactly. The high-speed OS is AI and semiconductors. It updates on a weekly, sometimes monthly basis, new chip designs, new AI models, new regulations. It's a constantly moving tectonic plate.
And the slow one.
The low-speed OS. That's things like population trends, geography, national narratives that have been around for centuries, institutional diplomacy. These things change over decades, if at all.
So when the high-speed OS, this tech imperative to split, suddenly lurches forward, it's dragging all those slow layers with it. The institutions, the diplomacy, and that's what's generating all this friction heat, the shear.
Precisely. The acceleration of the tech imperative is just so rapid, it's outpacing the durability of state narratives, of diplomatic protocols. You have institutions designed for slow, deliberate trade talks, trying to manage a hyper-accelerated technical separation. This mismatch is what's creating geopolitical instability.
So where do we see this friction heat becoming a real danger point?
The heat is most pronounced in three very sensitive areas. First, the Taiwan Strait. It's the physical choke point for all of this advanced manufacturing.
Okay.
Second, South Korea's export structure, which is just massively exposed to this regulatory velocity. And third, the policies of ASEAN's neutral nations. They find their attempts at measured, slow diplomacy are just overwhelmed by the sheer pace of tech policy coming out of Washington. The speed mismatch means you can't adapt without getting burned.
Okay, so the structure is permanent, the friction is high. But here's the paradox that the source material points out.
Yeah.
Despite all this structural friction and volatility, certain key markets are strangely quiet. What does this abnormal calm actually mean?
This quietness is a massive warning sign. We call it membrane hardening or calcification. Think about that fault line again. It should be having constant tremors, but instead, it's unnaturally silent.
Right.
Normally, a complete split of a critical supply chain would trigger huge volatility in financial markets, especially in places like South Korea or Asian financial hubs.
So why is it quiet? I mean, why is silence more concerning than the market freaking out?
Because it suggests rigidity. Calcification means the system isn't fluid anymore. It's not processing new information. And there are a few possible reasons. Either the market is just paralyzed, it can't price this kind of complex risk, or transparency is so low that nobody knows their true exposure. Or, and this is the most worrying, that there are hidden interventions, regulatory or otherwise, that are suppressing the natural market reaction. This quiet isn't stability. It's a signal that nonlinear risk is building up under a rigid surface, like pressure in a sealed container.
That totally reframes how we should look at market stability. Okay, let's go to the deepest tension here, the one driving this whole conflict, the compatibility error. This suggests the two operating systems aren't just incompatible on a tech level, but in their fundamental logic.
This is the core issue that rational, Western-style policymakers really struggle with. The U.S. OS, it tries to operate its tech security based on rationality. It uses measurable specs, performance thresholds, legal frameworks. It's a STEM-based empirical approach to control.
And the China local OS is driven by something else entirely.
It operates largely on symbolism, national pride, party legitimacy, the symbolic necessity of hitting technological milestones, ethnic identity. These are deeply embedded, non-rational drivers that can easily supersede market logic.
So the compatibility error is when the U.S. applies a rational technical restriction, and the Chinese system just interprets it through a completely symbolic lens.
That's it, exactly. The collision between that technical rationality and the symbolic necessity creates these non-linear, unpredictable reactions. The intended effect of the sanction, to slow down technical progress, it runs headlong into a reverse reaction.
Right.
The restriction elevates the status of the forbidden technology. It becomes an even greater national symbol. The more you deny them a technology, the higher its value as a totem of national self-reliance rises.
So it sounds like the sanctions are, ironically, just validating the Chinese narrative that they need self-reliance. The technical chokehold becomes a source of symbolic urgency.
That transformation, where the intended effect of the policy, what we call the operable area, runs into the inoperable area of the domestic narrative. That's what's leading to this system-level transformation. We're watching policies designed for technical results actually fueling symbolic and political change.
Okay, before we zoom out for the final takeaways, let's really ground this. For the listener trying to budget or plan their business strategy, what does this OS-level split mean for everyday life? What's the life impact over the next few years?
Okay, let's break it down by time frame. In the short term, say the next 3 months, you should expect some upward pressure on prices. High-performance smartphones, PCs, anything that relies on the most advanced chips. We'll likely see some initial cost increases from supply chain stress, and maybe minor price adjustments on certain AI services you use.
And what about the midterm, looking out 6 to 12 months?
That's when it really starts to hit the corporate level. Companies, big and small, will face increased costs for adopting AI solutions. The supply chain mess translates directly into higher R&D and deployment expenses. And crucially, expect continued fluctuation in the supply and pricing of all semiconductor products coming out of Taiwan and Korea as they scramble to adjust to this new split demand world.
And in the long term, 3 to 5 years out, this is the real structural change you mentioned.
The defining long-term effect is the permanent establishment of a dual non-interoperable ecosystem, the US OS and the China OS. And this goes way beyond just your smartphone. The difference in usable AI, the sheer computational power, the speed, the access to advanced models, that's going to become a tangible factor in daily life. It'll impact everything from manufacturing costs to healthcare delivery. You will literally be operating inside a system defined by its geopolitical alignment.
That's a powerful picture of a divided future. So if we take the whole structural view, this entire MGF analysis, what is the single most critical observation the listener should take away from this moment?
The real criticality. It's not just the separation itself, it's the simultaneous emergence of 3 distinct structural issues.
Right.
This new regulation, it signifies the permanent second stage of OS separation, and it's characterized by what we're calling this triple threat.
Let's just nail those 3 down one last time for everyone.
First, speed mismatch, sheer. You have fast technology, updating weekly, literally tearing at slow politics and national stories. Second, membrane silence, calcification. That abnormal quietness in key financial markets, which signals that risk is building up rigidly under the surface instead of being processed.
And
third, OS incompatibility. That fundamental conflict between rational technical security mechanisms on one side and deeply symbolic national narratives on the other. All 3 of these are happening right now and reinforcing this permanent divergence.
This analysis just gives a depth that the simple headline, "Sanctions were strengthened," completely misses. This is a structural pivot, not just another increment.
The tension is immense, and it's all hidden in the details of speed and rhetoric.
So here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, and it connects right back to that compatibility error. Our discussion shows that when rationality, the technical design of a sanction, clashes with deeply embedded symbolism, a national narrative of self-reliance, the results are unpredictable. The restricted technology becomes more symbolic, more desirable, and that often determines the future. So ask yourself this: how often, when you're reading the news, do you mistake a country's symbolic reaction, its necessary, patriotic response, for its rational action? That gap between technical intent and narrative effect is the fault line you need to be watching in the years ahead.
Pay attention to the silence and the speed.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.